What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Wheel of Time diary, and I think this is the third one for the Shadow Rising. I'm not entirely sure if it is the third one or further. I'm pretty sure it's the third one because that's how I've been calculating math for what page and whatnot I've needed to be on. Speaking of, last week when we did this, I believe I was on like page 140 when, via the math of when I plan to have this book finished, I needed to be on about 180 of the hardcover, so I was about 40 pages behind. This week, I'm needing to be at about page 260, 265 or so, and I am on page 275, so I'm right around 10 pages ahead, which means that I caught up to where I needed to be. Was everything that I read over the past week as good as the first couple weeks? I would say it's getting there, but probably not. I think this week and last week, because I didn't actually give a technical star rating for the reading last week, I would say that this week and last week are both probably just 4 stars, maybe 4.5 stars for this week, because there is some great stuff and it's kind of gotten away from the stuff that I haven't been enjoying as much. But back on that topic of, catching up and whatnot, I read for about 8.5 hours this week, which is a little bit more of my normal reading time for a Wheel of Time book in any given week. So yeah, I was definitely a little bit, and I was more on time this week, and I'm hoping to get a little bit ahead over the coming week, so that December is a little bit more comfortable for me, generally speaking. So this week I did read chapters 11 through 23, so that was about 13 chapters. Not too shabby. I would say that the beginning of what I read this week was probably the more mediocre, I guess, of what I've read in the series so far. I think it's had the worst material of the series so far, just kind of besides those two random POVs, those one chapter, I guess, from The Great Hunt that I just didn't enjoy. This chapter is, or this book has had a couple chapters that have just been, oh man, they've been kind of difficult to get through, all things considered. So there is a little bit, I guess, to talk about early on from what I read over the week, but I think this diary is going to be a little bit more scattered than normal, partially because of the POV allocation and what stuff is happening, and everything in the Shadow Rising so far has been really neat in that you kind of go from POV to POV because everything's kind of interconnected at this point in the timeline. So basically all the major POVs are just kind of going back and forth doing their thing, and that's just kind of how the story's going. Whereas, say, The Dragon Reborn especially spent a lot of time with a single POV before switching to another one, and would usually spend a lot of time with that POV before switching again, which made these diaries actually a little bit easier to do. But I will try my best to get through what happened this week. There's really not much to say in terms of the spoiler-free beyond the fact that I think the story's leading up to some really great things, most especially where Rand's storyline is... where Rand's storyline is concerned, I suppose I'll stay. And there's actually a couple more reasons for this, just beyond the content of what I read in the book, but also because of what a couple friends have said. One friend mentioned that I'm coming up real close on one of his favorite Rand moments in the entire series, and he's on the last book right now, so that kind of says something pretty big is going to happen pretty soon. And also because another friend, based off of what I posted from chapter 23 today, said wait for it, as if the next chapter or two are going to get pretty insane, or maybe the next few chapters pacing of the book. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen next, but I think this week was a lot more about setup, I suppose, of what's going to be happening imminently, with basically all the storylines, actually, rather than what actually happened, if that makes sense. As for the spoiler talk, the first couple chapters of what I read this week, chapters 11 and 12, were primarily concerned with Tel'aran'rhiod and Egwene's trip to Tel'aran'rhiod. She was attempting to take another trip to see if she could find the Black Aja in Tanchico, I believe it was, because that's where the girls are planning to head. So she's trying to see if she can find the Black Aja there in the dream world for whatever reason, or otherwise, figure out what's going on down there, so they have an idea of what they're heading into. At least that's my understanding of it. Instead, she kind of has troubles in this dream world thinking about Aiel, and ends up in a part of Tel'aran'rhiod where she encounters an Aiel Wise One who can apparently work the power. I think this is one that can work the power, but at the very least, she can dream walk. So there's a little bit of interaction here. And Egwene was essentially commanded by this Aiel Wives one to come to Ruidian, and that's how I'm going to pronounce this. The name of this place in the Aiel Waste. I apologize if it's pronounced incorrectly, because I'm going to be saying it a lot in this video. So if it's wrong and you're going to cringe, I apologize again. But yeah, so Egwene has basically been commanded to come to, oh good grief, Ruidian. That's the name. I'm forgetting names all over again. But yeah, that's what's going on in these first couple chapters, is these sort of interactions with the Aiel, and then Egwene talking with like Moraine about her decision that she's going to go to Ruidian, to the Aiel Waste, rather than to Tanchico with Elaine and Nynaeve. Good grief, why are names so confusing? It is hard to keep some of this stuff straight. Like, I have it in my head, I can see the images that I have of the characters in my mind and know kind of where they're going on the map, and that's how I'm sort of visualizing things. But when I'm trying to put it into words right now, it is hard to come up with the names sometimes when there's 50,000 of them just hovering right at the forefront of my mind. But yeah, that's some cool stuff with Egwene's timeline in my reading this week, more of which we'll get into a little bit later in this video. The next couple chapters, I would say, were a little bit more mediocre. Chapter 13 was actually pretty nice in that Matt was kind of around in, I think he was in a tavern somewhere, where he was hearing rumors about white cloaks being in the Two Rivers. So this was something that I believe was in the Bornhald POV of chapter 1. I believe that's when it happened. Basically, the White Cloaks trying to locate Perrin in the Two Rivers. Matt hears rumor of this and weeds out a little bit more rumor of this. And so he decides that he's going to talk to Perrin about it. Perrin, when Matt talks to him, is clearly very determined to go home. Matt is conflicted about whether he's going to go home or not, which I'm not 100% sure I understand personally. But Matt is definitely conflicted about going home, and eventually decides that he's not going to go home to the Two Rivers, where Perrin is obviously quite determined to do so. The next chapter, 14, is a Perrin POV, and this was probably one of the lowest points in the series for me so far. Actually, no, it's not, but it definitely is kind of down there. A lot of the Perrin POVs in this book have been pretty mediocre because of Zareen and their absolutely cringe and awful relationship. It's already so bad. I can't imagine how much worse it gets, because I know it gets worse based off of, talk, the way that people talk about it. Either way, Perrin has encounters with both Berylane and Zareen in his room, proving just how toxic the relationship is already, like I said, with Zareen. But even where Berylane was dissolved, Perrin's use of Berylane to try to stab at Zareen, which I guess you can kind of understand his motivation. He doesn't want Zareen to follow him to the Two Rivers. He wants her to just kind of leave and be away from him, because he feels like his purpose in this journey is dangerous for her. So it's kind of a noble pursuit to some degree, but the fact that he uses Berylane as like a jealous object to stab at Zareen and, maybe make her want to stay away from Perrin is a horribly, horribly toxic way to go about it. And then when Zareen is, obviously pushed away by this comment, what she does is she chases down Berylane and is very unfriendly with Berylane as a result, causing a scene that Ruark the Aiel has to intervene. I'm pretty sure this was a new POV in that Zareen hasn't had a dedicated one in the series so far, but this was certainly a choice for her first scene as a dedicated POV. Not entirely sure how I felt about that. Either way, next up, instead of, following Matt's confliction about going home to the Two Rivers, Matt, who was told earlier in the book by, I think it might have been Elaine. I think it was Elaine, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was either Egwene or Elaine that told Matt about the doorways, the Terra Angreal at the, underneath the Stone of Tyr, that a person can enter and have 3 questions answered as long as they don't touch the shadow. I think that's how it was worded. Either way, Matt goes down there and decides to enter a doorway and ask questions, and he somehow is able to weasel out more than 3 answers. I think based off of the dialogue of the book, he managed to get 6 out. Not many of them horribly clear, except for the fact that he's not supposed to go home to the Two Rivers. So he was kind of right in feeling that he's not supposed to. He is instead supposed to go to Ruidian, as well as, Egwene and Avienda, I guess. I guess they're both supposed to go. Because, that was part of the discussion that Egwene and Elaine and Nynaeve and Avienda were having with Moraine earlier in the book, when Egwene said she was going to go to Ruidian while the other two girls were going to go to Tanchico. Avienda expressed that she wanted to go to Tanchico with the other two girls, but Moraine said, no, you're going to Ruidian with Egwene. I forget the exact reasons why, but that did happen. And also, apparently, Rand and Moraine were in the doorway at the same time as Matt. When Matt emerges, he is basically surprised to see Rand there. Rand asks if Matt also entered the doorway, I guess. So both of them were in at the same time, which apparently was causing issues with the ter'angreal for reasons, because they're both Ta'veren, I guess. Both male Ta'veren entering the doorways. But Moraine also emerges shortly afterwards as well, and she calls them fools. So all three of them apparently go in search of questions. I don't believe I've discovered yet what Rand's questions were. I don't think his POVs that I've read since then, even though I'm pretty sure there actually was only one POV since then, actually went into that, and we haven't had a Moraine POV either. So we don't know what any of the questions were except for Matt's. But this was a very cool chapter. I really like this kind of stuff that deals with the ter'angreal and the One Power and these prophecies and all that whatnot. It's one of my more favorite aspects of the series so far. The next chapter is back to a Perrin POV. There's probably, oh man, just not great stuff, man. I'll tell you what. It was a scene between Zareen and Perrin and Loyal where they're basically preparing to leave, and Perrin, wants to go to the Two Rivers, so he wants to take Loyal through the ways to go home to the Two Rivers, because that will be the quickest way back and to the only real way to even sort of ensure that he'll be back in time to do anything about the White Cloak. So that's what he's doing. But apparently Zareen got to him first, anticipating this move, and made Loyal promise certain promises so that she has to come along as well. And boy, these conversations were just not fun to read. It was not very great, to be perfectly honest. Although the back half of the chapter was a nearly equally cringe scene, actually, with Lan and Nynaeve observed by Egwene and Elaine, where Lan is upset at Nynaeve for deciding to leave to Tanchico, or not allowing him to come with her because Moraine's going elsewhere. And Nynaeve essentially forces Lan to go with Moraine rather than with her. This scene was not particularly great either, but, it is what it is. It's just kind of a miss of a chapter for me, all things told. The next chapter had another Tom POV, which I was happy to see. I really like Tom, and he has interactions with Moraine about the game and her wanting him to join the girls to Tanchico as well. So there's more plotting, like all these characters are kind of going these two directions. At first, I thought that the characters were going to go three different directions, at least all the major characters in the story, but it seems like they're mostly being split between the Aiel Waste towards Ruidian or towards Tanchico via the Sea Folk, because that's the way that they're going to go about that journey. The back half of the chapter was a Min POV, which foreshadows, I believe, what is going to be a big aspect of Loghain's character becoming big or important throughout the series at some point. I think that was a pretty clear element of foreshadowing. Like, if it wasn't, then I would be very surprised by Jordan's writing throughout the rest of the series, which I found pretty neat. But then there was also a reveal that the tower, the White Tower, now has word that Rand is officially the Dragon Reborn, that he holds Kalandor, and so the Amyrlin can now officially basically support Rand, which I think is really neat. And up to this point in the series, I've actually really enjoyed a lot of the Aes Sedai stuff. I think the Aes Sedai stuff, generally speaking, has been my favorite. Like, just broadly speaking, I've really enjoyed all of the Egwene stuff, the Nynaeve stuff, all of the Aes Sedai stuff. Moraine was one of my favorite characters in the first couple books, so, like, I haven't had any issues with the Aes Sedai so far. So this POV I really liked, and I really like Min as a character. I'm glad that she's had a couple POVs in the book. And then, actually, at the very end of this chapter 17, there was some very, very short POV of an Aes Sedai called Mistress Elward, who kills Sara, who is the one that led Min to the Amyrlin when she returned in her Elmandrada disguise, and Elward kills Sara. Forward of Min, which is concerning. I'm not entirely sure where that's going or what it's going to be doing, but it was definitely a shocking scene for me. I didn't see that coming necessarily. And then the next chapter, chapter 18, was the one that I think was probably the worst chapter in the series for me now. Easily, because Perrin, Zareen, and Loyal make way to the Ways. We learn a tiny bit of interpersonal conflict among the Aiel as well. There's a little bit going on there, which is expanded upon later in particularly chapter 23, I think it is. But basically, this chapter was just bad. It was mostly the stupid and really cringe bickering between Perrin for the most part, and Loyal, I guess, and it was just not fun. I'm not looking forward to this storyline throughout basically the entirety of the series, to be honest, with how much I'm not enjoying it already at this point in the book. But either way, the next couple chapters, 19 and 20, are Nynaeve and Elaine making their way onto the ship Wave Dancer, which is making its way to Tenchiko. This is a sea folk ship. I really enjoyed learning a little bit about these new characters. There's not really too much to say beyond, sort of the hints and the lore and the world building that was included in these chapters. And then the fact that Tom and whatever his name, Sandar, however you pronounce it, the guy who got Egwene and Nynaeve and Elaine caught in the Dragon Reborn, but also freed them with Matt. Was it Matt that freed them with Sandar? I think that was how it went. These two are joining on the trip to Tenchiko under permission of Nynaeve and Elaine. I did not expect for Sandar to come this way. I expected for Tom to do it based off of his POV that we discussed earlier. But then there was a little bit of interesting material from Elaine's POV trying to determine if she knew Tom for a little bit, because Tom, obviously had dealings with Morghese and Andor for a little bit of his time when Elaine was very young. There was also some cool, interesting stuff that the wind finder of this vessel uses the power to help sail the ship, which is a really cool concept that Elaine was able to follow up on because she noticed the weaving of wind or air, I guess, from Joran, however you pronounce her name, the wind finder. I'm looking forward to this storyline. I'm looking forward to the Druidian timeline, and I'm not looking forward to the Perrin timeline at this point. Story. But yeah, these last three chapters are basically Rand POV with a little bit of Egwene at the end as well, heading towards Ruidian. So Rand basically calls a council and gets people, a lot of his potential would-be assassins out of Tyr on some sort of journey to make aid for, what is the place, Carrion? Yeah, aid Carrion in the civil war that is kind of going on up there, where everybody wanted him to make war with Ilion. He decides to go a different direction, but he does get a lot of people out of Tyr for this purpose, but then also announces that he's leaving Tyr as well. So this kind of like both of these decisions together kind of seems strange to me, but also kind of cool. He reveals that he is also going to make way for Ruidian alongside, Egwene and Moraine and Matt and Aviendha. I think those are all the sort of main characters that I feel like are going that direction, while Perrin and Loyal are going to the Two Rivers, and, the other girls are going to Tenchiko. And I guess I lied earlier. I guess there is that third storyline going in the third direction with Perrin and Loyal and Rivers. I guess I kind of forgot about that storyline for a split second when I said that earlier, because I wanted to and because I didn't want to deal with that storyline. Either way, the one-sentence summary of Chapter 22 is that Rand takes everyone to the Portal Stone to take them to Ruidian. You get a little bit more of his mindset. His POV is just really great. I really enjoyed this stuff. I also really enjoyed, reading more about the elements of Portal Stones and everything unfolding, especially the way that it was used in the Great Hunt, which was a little bit more confusing and was like, what exactly is this thing? Whereas now I feel like I have a better understanding of it, so it was just really cool to read. But Chapter 23 was definitely the standout scene of what I read this week. I was kind of surprised by how fantastic this chapter was, actually, between, multiple different elements with the Wise Ones allowing Rand and also Matt to head into Ruidian, which is apparently something that Outlanders aren't allowed to do. So Matt being able to do that was kind of a change of habit, I suppose. But then the wise ones also force Aviendha to give up her spear because she is destined to become a wise one herself. So you got to see a little bit of conflict there, which I enjoyed. There was also various discussions about Aiel lore, which was expanded on here, that I really enjoyed. Getting to know. I just enjoyed learning about the different groups of peoples in this world, and kind of where their place is and how certain aspects of their culture are different from other cultures. I really enjoyed all of that. And then there's also a little bit of talking about the dream walking aspect of stuff, which brings up a little mention that Moraine was supposed to follow after Aviendha, so she decides to follow after Aviendha. So you have Mat, Rand, Aviendha, and Moraine all heading into Rubidian, leaving Egwene essentially alone with the Wise Ones to talk about this dream world and how to control dreams in the most effective manner at the very end. So it only briefly got into that and gave a little bit of information about it, but I really enjoyed what was there. One of my favorite chapters of this book so far was chapter 20. But that is what I read. Like I said, I had a couple people mention that I'm very closely coming up on very cool material with Rand's storyline especially, so I expect for the material in Ruidian to be very good. We'll see how this goes. I think the next 3 chapters are going to be continuing the storyline: 24 titled Ruidian, 25 The Road to the Spear, and 26 The Dedicated. The Dedicated was learned to be sort of like a play on words, like it's how Aiel technically translates in some sense as the Dedicated, although it means a little bit deeper than that. But yeah, so I think these next 3 chapters are going to be continuing this storyline, and then chapter 27 Within the Ways gets back to the Two Rivers storyline, which we'll see how that goes. Either way, I'm excited to continue on with a couple of these storylines for sure, and looking forward to seeing how much of this I can read over the week, since I'm now caught up a bit on where I'm supposed to be in the book now. Let's see if I can get a little bit ahead this next time. But if you watched this video all the way through, thank you so much for watching it. I really appreciate it. This one was a little bit longer than the last couple because I actually read a little bit more, and so there was a little bit more to talk about and dive into. But thank you guys for watching nonetheless. I'll be back with another one of these next week. And by the way, happy Thanksgiving. I'm sorry to publish this video on Thanksgiving, even though I publish all of these videos on Thursdays. But if you watch this video today, instead of spending time with your family, shame on you, but also thank you. Otherwise, I'll be back again next week with another video just like this on Thursday, just like normal, continuing the book. Although I'll also have a bi-weekly update on Sunday, and then another book review on something. I forget exactly what. I think is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, coming out on Tuesday. So if you're interested in any of that, I would greatly appreciate if you check it out. But thank you for watching. I'll be back in the next video.